first off, before I forget, I want to add our club's flag and our Crutches for Africa flag to your wall of flags.
Wall of flags, yes. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're very welcome. So, nice to be with you all. I bring greetings from my Rotary Club. We're just up in the foothills, just west of Denver. We live actually in Denver, but we're commuter Rotarians, and how that worked out is they were the club that invited me to be their international project, and that's Crutches for Africa. But before I get too far into Crutches for Africa, you know what, and folks, what we need to do is, since my screen's that way, I'm going to change my animal pictures out, and I've got pictures that illustrate everything I'm talking about. So I'm going to go back that way, and I'm going to have you going back and forth here just a little bit. But in the spring of 1955, does anybody remember something that happened that was
I do.
really... She's heard this a number of times this week. What happened in 1955 that is something that Rotary is very involved in now?
Salk vaccine.
Yes.
What was that?
The
Salk vaccine.
vaccine.
That's right.
Leave it
They
to
announced it. They announced that vaccine 2 weeks before I had polio. So I came down with it right after they came out with that. Let's see. Hang on just a second when you get organized.
I was there.
Anybody in the room had polio?
No. My sister did.
Is she still alive?
No, she had it when she was 3. She passed away when she was 19.
Oh gosh. Did that affect her lungs?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is a good example of that. I was on a ward with a whole bunch of other kids. There was a bunch of kids that were in the iron lungs. And for you youngsters in the crowd, the iron lung is what helped you to know it. It gave you a way to breathe. Polio would infect either arms, legs, or your respiratory, your chest muscles, and you wouldn't be able to breathe. And so they'd put you in this chamber, and the chamber would, the pressure would push the air in your lungs out, and then when it released the pressure, the air would be able to come into your lungs. It's just a simple way to do that. And I hope y'all don't mind. I'm glad we already had lunch, because I'm not going to take my pants off like I did over in Dumas. I think that's what got me on the news over there. I know they've got that on their website, but it affected my left leg, and so they had to actually cut out the calf muscle, and then they stabilized my ankle, and they cut the Achilles tendon, and I'm going to show you some more pictures on why they did that. So it really underdeveloped. And again, when they took out the calf muscle, because it was dead, my thigh is underdeveloped, and my left ham, let's just go with that, is underdeveloped, but I've got a scar here, and scars there. And then they stopped the growth in my right leg. They put ceiling staples in my right knee, 3 of them on each side in the growth plates, so that I wouldn't grow up to be 6'2" on one side and 5'7" on the other. It's hard enough getting shoes. This size, I think this is a 6.5, and it fits pretty good. My right shoe is a 9, so I have to get shoes that are either a men's right and a woman's left, or a boy's left. And so trying to match those up. My leg is always cold. I've had to quit skiing. Now, I got to tell you, too, you see me on crutches today. I haven't always been on crutches. I healed up pretty good. You know, I was in a wheel. Well, they told my folks I'd never walk again. And so, of course, that was the first thing I tried to do. Well, what do you do with a 2.5-year-old? You know, you're not going to slow them down very much. So I really had an advantage being very young. You know, I can't imagine people that were older and understood and knew what mobility was about, and then they lost it. I think that's really a tragedy. For me, that's where I got cognitive. That's what I remember, was having to overcome that. I was in a wheelchair. I had braces on both legs. I had crutches, and actually started kindergarten with a brace still on my left leg, and the first day showed up with crutches, and there was a kid named Frank. Any Franks in the room? All right, good. I'm still looking for Frank. Frank was giving me a hard time, and Frank failed to realize that crutches are longer than my arms. And I whacked Frank upside the head, got him on the ground and pummeled him, and the kids cheered. And then Frank and I got to be good friends after that. But got away from all the crutches, and by the time I was in 3rd grade, the only thing that was left residual for me was I had really ugly shoes. And so at that point, then things started going up for me. I just turned into a real jock. I was an athlete all the way through. And because they said, push, 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 go, 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 use it or lose it. And so I took that very seriously, and I did everything athletic I possibly could. I wasn't much of a runner in long distance, but I could sprint 40 yards pretty good. So I was a middle linebacker in high school. I was a wrestler. Bicycled across Europe a couple of times, ran with the Bulls in Pamplona. I was a chief of a fire department, and so I wasn't always on crutches. Unfortunately, post-polio came back and started to get on me about 10 years ago. Post-polio syndrome is a recurrence of the symptoms of the disease of polio, not the disease itself. And what that is it's joint, bone, and muscle pain. And then whatever affected area of your body starts to get weak again. So I'm a professional photographer. My wife and I have been doing professional photography and filmmaking for 32 years. And the problem was my knee would go out. You know when kids would tap you in the back of your knees when you're in the lunch line at school and you'd throw your lunch in the air? Remember that? Well, that's what was going on with my left knee, but without anything touching it. It would just go out. Problem with that was I'd be looking up at camera equipment coming down out of the sky at me. So I realized at that point that things were changing, and I started to look into what the post-polio was all about, and sure enough, that was where I was headed. So I've been back on crutches now, well, for probably about 10, 12 years. And I actually came up with my own design. I haven't had a chance to show this off too much on this trip. But I need to, when I'm traveling, I need to be able to break these things down pretty good. So I took a bunch of pieces and parts from other crutches and came up with this design. This is actually, well, I started out with tent poles, and the handle's from a different pair, and the seat is from a different pair, and this cushion, with this motion, it keeps my armpit from wearing out from all the friction, but with that cushy too, I love, my armpits love these crutches. And then there's a little button back up here on the top, and when I press that, it flips over, and I can't really sit on it, but I can take a load off anyway. You know, and so it's only a couple inches actually shorter than when I'm standing up. So when I go to the international conventions for Rotary, it's good to be able to, you know, not stand around on cement for 10, 12 hours. So we have to adapt. But let me go in and show you some of the pictures of people that we see in Africa and some of the conditions. This is a friend of mine. His name is James. James weighs 62 pounds. Both of his legs are twisted up behind him. His spine is just in a tortuous curve. Now, when we weighed James, well, they actually brought James to us in a wheelbarrow. And he can't lay on his back, so he was on his front. They had a blanket in there, and his head was sticking up in the front. And nobody in the community even knew that James existed. Now, let's just assume that James' mom was 15 years old when she had James. She would have been 64 at the time when I first met James. And, of course, he can't get up and do anything. So his mom has to pick him up, and she carries him like a human pretzel. And she picks him up and had to carry him outside the hut to go to the bathroom. So James just cannot and has not ever, he had polio when he was 5, so he's never been able to take care of himself. Again, just another person that's actually at one of our distributions waiting for crutches, but another example of polio. And a lot of times they'll use these poles in place of the affected leg. Now this is just such a perfect example of what happens and why they cut my Achilles tendon. That the tendons will shrink up and it pulls that foot all the way around. We've seen them where they've actually been pulled all the way around, so that if they're able to walk, they're walking on the front edge of their ankle. But we see all kinds of distortions. There's a fellow that's waiting for us to come in for a distribution. And again, here's one of the poles that people often use. You can see his left leg is turned and withered from polio. And we see this a lot, crawlers. What we don't see is folks that put